All right, thank you for giving me the time today to allow me to interview you. Just for the sake of the interview here, can you give me your name and title, please?
My name is Tiffany Dreyer. I am the Senior Director of Brand and Creative at Marvell Technology.
Hey, thank you. So we're going to jump right into the hiring portion. So tell me what qualities outside of technical skills are you looking for in a candidate, and what about those qualities make that candidate compelling?
I mean, for me, when I'm conducting a hire or a search, for me, is fit is so important. And just to give you a little background on, yeah, I lead a creative and brand team. So we're not a technical field, we're a group of people that think freely and creatively and outside the box. And so when I'm interviewing people, it's like, okay, yeah, Photoshop, cool. How do you a big piece of me is fit, are they do they like working as a team? What do they do in their free time? I'm really intrigued on what are their hobbies? Where do you draw design inspiration? And so I really like to pick that apart, especially when it comes to creatives. It's like, okay, yeah, you can search on something on Google, but do you read magazines? Are you looking through books for type or typography, layout, hierarchy? And usually when you ask those questions, you start to see candidates open up, and you'll see them, start to express more of their passion. Or, what a design intern we just ended up hiring full time. She expressed that she likes knitting, and it was something that you wouldn't normally attribute to a graphic design job at a tech company. But it ended, I mean, she has little knitted figures in her cube and stuff, and it's a talking point when people stop by her cube now, and so I encourage that. I encourage people, there's boundaries. You don't want to go too far where you're asking personal questions, but it helps someone feel comfortable. A lot of designers are introverts, and so trying to find it like something that I have in common with the candidates, like, do you like dogs or whatever? That's something that I really, I put a heavy focus towards. And then I also ask about, like, where do they see I mean, it's kind of cliche, where do you see yourself in 3 to 5 years, but do you see yourself in a true design position? Do you see yourself leading a team? And if they divulge, that they someday want to be a manager, then it's like, okay, would they be interested in leading this facet of my organization, or do they want to just be like in production, heads down, doing graphic design? And so I always like to pry a little bit beyond just their resume. I think the resume is pretty straightforward. And so, yeah.
So in terms of identifying that fit, I hear you asking after some of their hobbies, or so what else do you use to tease out some of that um, appropriate fit that you're looking for?
We're at Marvell, we have a very lean team. And so we're always being asked to do more with less. I mean, I think that's the case across the board with how impacted many organizations are. But to give you an idea, instead of just being like, oh, do you like dogs? Like, you're not just going to like come out and say something like that. But I like to, and this is kind of my sneaky way of being like, hey, we have a need. Let's just talk about AI. AI is a big topic right now, so it's like, we have a need, since we're being asked to do more with less. How do you use AI in your day to day? And then sometimes even that. So you're using a tool, but AI is there's AI technology and different programs and stuff you can use across the board. And another interview that we had with another candidate that I had, she was talking about AI in Photoshop, right? And she's like, oh, and I use it in my personal time. I make, like birthday cards and stuff for my friends. And then she opened up that way, right? So there are ways to cross over, and where you're still staying within your guardrails, but you're getting someone to open up and show excitement about something. And then that kind of opens up the door, like, oh, your birthday cards, is this like a hobby of yours in your free time? Or and so just getting people to come out of their shell, that's where I find where you can get like a true interview from someone versus like, you know, tell me about your past history, so.
Three responses. Describe a situation where you needed to address an employee's poor performance.
Okay. There was an employee, this happened probably last fall. And I mean, very flighty, was just showing up to work later and later. I would give her projects to lead. And when I say projects, like a video project, leading an agency, we were kicking off something. And she was missing the mark in terms of like a kickoff call where you're essentially intaking, you're working with an agency and intaking everything that we may need in order to execute on a video. And so she was missing the mark, and I felt myself having to be at the table more and more to make sure that she was doing what she needed to do. So I sat down and I was like, I'm noticing some misses that are happening. And she was at Marvell for 8 years. And so that's very uncommon in the technology space for someone to be there that long. And I was just like, I have to ask, are you happy? It's, again, we're such a lean team, and I need people that want to be here. Right. And so, and she divulged that she was going through some personal things. And I said, okay, what can I do to help maybe offload something that may be stressing you out at work? Can we maybe reposition what you're doing day to day, so that you feel inspired, you feel like you want to come to work, and what can I do to support you, right? And I'll say she made some, yeah, some, I guess you could say, requests, or she's like, well, I would love to do more of this. So I did that, right? And then I had another check-in with her the following month, and she was still dropping the ball. Well, I didn't really like that. I want to do this. So then I started finding myself as a manager catering what I needed my team to execute on to her versus what I needed as a manager. And that was that was when I had an aha moment where I was like, I'm essentially enabling her, to continue this behavior. And then so what I ended up asking her, I was like, okay, this isn't working. So we have a couple options here. One, is there a different department within Marvell? Is there, because I never want to default to, I'm going to fire you. I want to figure out, maybe it's not a good fit, and that's okay. It's okay if this role, you've outgrown it, or something has happened. And she's like, well, I worked in events, I worked in design. And I mean, she did work. She's already been bounced around a lot. And she's like, I don't know, maybe Marvell isn't a good fit. And I was like, okay. And that's okay. So how can I help you with an exit plan? How can I help support you? How can I help be a reference to you? And that's only then the dialogue changed, where she actually started showing up for work and doing more because she felt supported. And it wasn't like I was trying to push her out by any means. But regardless, if someone's going through something, that's life. That doesn't mean you just give up on someone and discard them and be like, bye. So I helped her with an exit strategy.
Kind of an offshoot on that actually is my next question, which is, how do you develop trust within a team or an organization? And what sort of strategies have you implemented to foster trust?
In my last few roles, I have been hired as like a cleanup crew, right? So, there's been a broken team. They didn't have a leader. I mean, the person that I replaced at Marvell, they were terminated, very negative, exit. Same with my previous company, and the same before that. And so every single time I came into, it wasn't like a new role. It wasn't like a new team. I was inheriting some mess. Right. And so I think in those cases, you have to set your ego aside, or no matter how strong of a leader you think you are, you have to make sure that the team you're inheriting feels heard. Right. So I had one-on-ones, I had discovery sessions, both, with direct members of my team, as well as, holistic group think sessions, whiteboarding sessions, just trying to figure out, okay, what do you guys, do you think that the team is even doing what the team's being asked to do? to what was working with your previous manager. And I'm trying to take the person out of it, is just in terms of leadership, right? What would they like to have in a manager? What would they like our organization to do, right? Like my creative team is looked at almost like a service desk. And my team was like, yeah, anytime there's a fire, we have to put it out, or, we always get stuff last minute. I'm like, so it's almost like, and this is the joke that we still use with my team to this day. It's almost like you guys are looking for a Brita filter. You're looking for someone to filter out all the crap and to give you what you need so you can do your job.
Yeah.
And when I said that phrase, I mean, they all just like let out the sigh of relief. And they're like, that's what we've been missing. We've been missing someone who removes the roadblocks for us, because think about it, these are designers. They're not in a role where they need to necessarily think about strategy or budgets or navigating politics. These are a lot of my team is graphic designers, right? And they just want to do their job. They want to be creative and move on, and so once I was able to be like, okay, so if I was able to do this, if I was able to get the team more resources, if I was able to help enforce processes, so instead of someone making a request through Slack, emails, smoke signals, text messages, if we had one moment of truth where something came in, would that help you guys? And they're like, oh my God, so it was, I came into these type of roles to build trust. How can I help you? It wasn't like, I'm going to come in, I'm going to do this and this and this, I'm going to enforce my own agenda. That in my opinion is the complete wrong way, to approach a new team.
How do you approach changing the culture within an organization? And
I mean, it's going back to having, like, I have weekly team meetings with my direct report, or my direct team, and it's everyone, in terms of culture, everyone views the term and the idea of culture differently. For me, one thing that I noticed with my team when I was doing those, discovery sessions with them, they felt unappreciated, right? And so figuring out, okay, how do you guys like to be recognized? Do you guys like to be celebrated? Do you like when your manager shouts your name from the rooftop in a big leadership meeting saying, yeah, my team kicked ass doing this? Do you guys like a gift card? Do you like to go to Starbucks? Or how do you like to be appreciated? And I think that piece is a really important part that is overlooked when you talk about building culture. A lot of people do look at it as the happy hours and like the co-curricular experience outside of your day-to-day work. But I think the recognition piece is really, really important. And it was funny when I asked my team that, my friends, or my designer was like, oh, I don't want anyone to know, like I don't need to hear anything. And then I think about myself, I'm like, I want people to shout from the rooftops, how awesome I did at something, and so that was a fun dialogue. But I think going to, like, we go to creative conferences together, just me and my team. We'll go and eat lunch together. There are things as a group, as a team, that strengthen the bond, with one another that we do. And it's also, I don't know. I feel like the culture within my team is great, but you also have to make sure it's supported by your leadership. And when it's not, then you have that disconnect there. And then you almost feel like your team is siloed out from the rest of the organization. And that's something I'm still working on. I don't have an answer for you on that. It's hard. So
folks being siloed individually and then groups getting siloed is,
yeah.
especially in our, post-pandemic world, it seems like it seems
Yeah.
a big factor.
The other, leaders on the team, it's also up to us to make sure that we're being consistent in our approaches. Like, if let's say, I'll use a real life example, our events team will go do lunches in Santa Cruz and stuff. Like, they'll take a whole day off and do that. I'm like, we don't have the time to do that, and then that creates a divide there, and so it's just making sure that the leaders are aligned too. And so still a work in progress.
Well, I really appreciate your time. So
Yeah,
thank
of
you so much for allowing me to interview you.
course.